would now like to introduce Susana Simoes, who will do a brief lecture on Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet. Susana Simoes is a physical therapist with vast experience in the area of neurology and geriatric care. Susana is one of the founders of the Conscious Living Spiritist group in Miami, a charitable nonprofit organization with the mission of raising awareness about spiritism in the United States and of improving people's quality of life through self-knowledge and inner transformation. Susana is one of the associate editors of the Spiritist magazine and a member of the board of directors of the Spiritist Federation of Florida. Please join me in welcoming Susana.
Good afternoon. I have the very difficult task of keeping all of you awake after lunch with half of my voice after developing a case of laryngitis during this week. But we'll do our best, and it's really exciting to be able to investigate the numerous possibilities of the human soul. To me, it has been particularly exciting to be able to investigate a man who was a clairvoyant and who practiced so intelligently and with such an expression and an impact on the history of spirituality in America. This man was Edgar Cayce. For 43 years of his life, Edgar Cayce had the amazing ability of putting himself into a state of trance and providing people with any information they asked him, detailed information, whether it was about the past, the present, or the future. Edgar Cayce is known as one of the most deep, profound clairvoyants of all times, America's sleeping prophet, one of the most gifted psychics of the 20th century, and also as the miracle man of Virginia Beach, or yet a man with a pierced vision, able to read any human body as an X-ray machine. He was born in 1877 in a farm near Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Early on, he discovered that he had some abilities that his friends did not possess. Young Cayce had the ability of seeing things that others could not see. Usually, he would have these visions while reading his Bible under the woods. Early on, he found comfort in reading the Bible, and at the age of 10 years old, he decided that he was going to read the Bible from cover to cover once for every year of his life. But what made Cayce the sleeping prophet was an ability that surfaced when he was around 20 years old of age. And he was working as an insurance salesman when he developed, funny to say, a severe case of laryngitis. Well, if I am allowed to make a joke, I think Freud can explain that. So, in any case, he developed a severe case of laryngitis, a lot more serious than mine, because he didn't speak for one entire year. And he looked for doctors who could find him, and no one could find the cure. So, he could no longer work as an insurance salesman, and he went up to be a photographer. In 1901, a man who was a hypnotist and an entertainer named Hart was performing a theater in Hopkinsville and offered to assist Cayce by putting him under hypnosis. Amazingly, during hypnosis, Cayce's voice was back to normal, but during awakening state, he could no longer speak. But there was another man also in Hopkinsville who was a hypnotist and also an osteopath. His name was Lane. He was following Cayce's case and was very interested and also offered to assist. And so Cayce agreed, but Lane had a different idea. He suggested that Cayce would describe his own illness under hypnosis, which he does with a very clear voice under self-hypnosis. He describes the state of his vocal cords by saying, "We see the affected part. The affected part, the voice box not working due to nervous tension. It is a psychological state producing a physical effect. In order to cure, it's necessary to bring the blood flow to the voice box," which happened. And once he was awake, his voice was again back to normal. One day, Cayce received a call from a man who was a father of a 5-year-old girl. This is a very important case in Cayce's history. And this man had this girl, 5 years old, who had been ill since she was 2 years old. She had suffered an influenza attack, and because of the attack, her mind had stopped developing. Cayce provides a reading for this case, and during the readings, he states that really what had happened is, prior to the influenza attack, she had had a fall and had hurt her spine. And when the influenza attack came, the germs had settled where the injury was, and because of that, she was having the convulsions. So he prescribes a treatment where the spine is manipulated, and 3 days later, the convulsions had stopped, and 3 months later, her brain started to develop naturally again. Cases like this make Cayce very famous. And shortly, he started getting phone calls from people from all over the place. And at that time, he realized that in order to provide the readings, as the sessions were called, he didn't have to have the person next to him. Actually, was enough for him to know the person's name, address, and where the person was at the time of the reading. In 1910, he meets a doctor, Dr. Wesley Ketchum. Dr. Ketchum seek Cayce, like many others, to get a reading for his own condition, and he's healed as a result of the readings. And then he starts to use Cayce to treat some of his most difficult cases. And he ends up writing an article to the American Association of Clinical Research calling Cayce a medical wonder. As a result of that, the October 9th issue of the New York Times published this article where the headlines read, "Illiterate man becomes a doctor when hypnotized." I would like for you to listen a little bit of what the article says.
My subject simply lies down and folds his arms, and by autosuggestion goes to sleep. While in this sleep, which to all intents and purposes is a natural sleep, his objective mind is completely inactive, and only his subjective is working. By suggestions, he becomes unconscious to pain of any sort, and strange to say, his best work is done when he is seemingly dead to the world. I next give him the name of my subject and the exact location of same, and in a few minutes, he begins to talk as clearly and distinctly as anyone. He usually goes into minute detail in diagnosing a case, and especially if it be a very serious case. His language is usually of the best, and his psychologic terms and description of the nervous anatomy would do credit to any professor of nervous anatomy, and there is no faltering in his speech, and all his statements are clear and concise. He handles the most complex jawbreakers with as much ease as any Boston physician, which to me is quite wonderful in view of the fact that while in his normal state he is an illiterate man, especially along the line of medicine, surgery, or pharmacy, of which he knows nothing.
Much better voice than mine. Okay, in 1911, another very significant case was the Dalton's case. Dalton was a construction worker who had an accident and broke his kneecap in many different places. He looked for help with many doctors who told him that he would never walk again because the kneecap was broken beyond repair. So Cayce gives a reading and prescribes a treatment that was pretty radical for the time, was never tried before, which was the insertion of nails to hold the kneecap together. The surgery is performed and Dalton is able to walk again. So cases like that continue to increase his fame, and people start to look for him for all kinds of different reasons. In reality, fame also brought a lot of hardship to Cayce's life. Not only he was looked for and seek for all kinds of questions, mundane questions and things that people wanted to know, but also he was at several times in the course of his life investigated by people who were medical professionals or just non-medical professionals, but all with the same intent, to prove that he was a fraud. So here's some of the hardship that happens to him as he starts to give different types of readings, and another case, very interesting case.
Oddly, whether he gave a diagnosis, prescribed a cure, or predicted the future, Cayce forgot it all as soon as his eyes opened.
He didn't remember anything. He didn't remember anything that he said at the reading.
And soon...
Okay, so let me, well, basically what happens is like I have mentioned, people are looking for him for all kinds of, let me go back up here. Shall I try again?
Oddly, whether he gave a diagnosis, prescribed a cure, or predicted the future, Cayce forgot it all as soon as his eyes opened.
He didn't remember anything. He didn't remember anything that he said at the reading.
And soon, some clients caught on.
People would slip in a question about who's going to win a horse race or what's going to happen in the stock market. And he would answer them, much to their profit.
As clients got rich on his predictions, Cayce suffered from unexplainable migraine headaches.
Where there were selfish purposes involved, it was as if the radar screen got fuzzy. He couldn't tune in as clearly or as accurately.
It made him ill or made him upset stomach. He just said, I'm through. I'm not doing this anymore.
In 1912, with his young wife Gertrude and his son Hugh Lynn in tow, a disillusioned Cayce left Hopkinsville and the predictions behind him and moved to Selma, Alabama, where he went back to work as a photographer.
He continued that work until my brother dropped a match in a partially filled can of flashlight powder, and he burned his face terribly. And all the doctors said, well, he'll never see again, and my brother asked my father for a reading.
2 weeks later, after following his father's recommendations, Hugh Lynn's eye was as good as new.
Dad realized that he could help people again, and that he thought that maybe that's what he ought to do. But he made it a rule that Mother would be the one who asked the questions, so nothing could happen like happened in Hopkinsville.
Another problem that he had was he often could not find people, doctors, who would carry out the treatments provided by the reading. So he started to think about opening his own hospital with staff that would be able to perform the treatment. He goes to Texas, and there he ends up forming some ill-fated partnerships with people who are interested in seeking oil. The readings once more make it very clear for him that the information provided was never to be used for financial gains. In 1923, it's a very important moment. There is a shift here because for the first time he provides a horoscope reading. And in this reading, the idea of reincarnation surfaces. At first, it brought a lot of conflict for Cayce because of his Christian belief. And the reading suggests that he would read the Bible Still, once more, now with the idea of reincarnation in mind. And what he concludes is that reincarnation in no way, shape, or form was against his Christian beliefs. So the readings at this time, they expand, and he starts to talk about giving mental and spiritual counseling, dreams. He starts with the predictions, such as the beginning of World Wars I and II, the crash of the stock market in 1927, and also a very fascinating series on Jesus' life, whose details would later emerge with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1928, he's finally able to open the hospital in Virginia Beach. It closed during the Depression, but later reopened. Also in 1931, the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment was founded with the objective of studying and disseminating Cayce's readings. During World War II, Cayce received a whole bunch of mail, and at that point of time, the demand for the readings were very high, and he started to provide about 8 readings a day. He started to feel very tired and came to a point where he collapsed of exhaustion. As he gave himself the first reading, he also gave himself the last reading. And the reading told him that he was supposed to rest. And when his wife asked for how long, the reading said, until you're well or dead. Shortly after, he had a stroke. By the end of 1944, he told his friends that by the beginning of the year, he would be well and healed. He died in January 3rd of 1945. He left a legacy of 14,000 readings that have been divided between physical, life readings, business, dreams, and others. Most of the themes aborted the topics of origin and destiny of humanity, duality, universal laws, Jesus and Christ consciousness, where he believed that Jesus was a higher brother, and Christ consciousness, the consciousness that we all seeking to achieve, reincarnation, the existence of Atlantis, and earth changes. He never really spoke about his abilities unless someone asked him to. He never really thought of himself as being special or as a prophet. When people asked him what they could do to become more psychic, he would say that the goal was to become more spiritual, because psychic is of the soul. And as we develop our spirituality, we become more psychic. One of the most common themes that we found in the readings is that spirit is life, mind is the builder, physical is the result. When asked where the information came from, the sources, he would say that the information comes from people's subconscious mind and the Akashic records. Akashic records is a sort of universal database for every single thought, word, and deed that has ever been around. And many of these ideas seem pretty, I guess I'm supposed to end. Let me just say that in the Medium's book, there is an explanation that none of these things that seem so marvelous and out of this world, even though they're out of the incarnated world, they are miracles or anything like that. All these phenomena, there's an explanation because they're part of the natural laws. And if we are dealing with the principle of the existence of the soul, the immortality of the soul, and the manifestations of the soul, all these can be explained. In the Spirit's book, from question 425 to 455, there is an explanation in details of clairvoyance. And I am going not to read, but just say that it is a state of independence of the soul where the soul is able to be outside of the body, and just like in dreams, but with a greater possession of its faculties, is able to travel, is able to see with the eyes of the spirit and not the physical eyes. So when we think of Cayce, he was not a medium in the most rigorous definition of the term. His faculty was a faculty of his own soul, that's able to live, that's able to see, that's able to bridge with the spiritual world. But Okay. All right. That's not fair because my video didn't work. Anyway, okay, thank you.